Legends like Carlos Santana aren't just born, they're forged. For decades, his guitar has been a source of healing, a vessel carrying rhythms and melodies that speak directly to the soul. But what happens when the man behind the music needs healing himself? At 77, Santana has finally peeled back the layers of his life, revealing a truth many of us may have felt in his music but never fully understood. What Santana has revealed now isn't just a chapter of his life. It's the key to understanding the soul behind the sound. Let's take a journey into the untold story of Carlos Santana, where every chord is a cry, every riff a revelation, and every word a glimpse into the heart of a true legend. You know, there's something sensational about legends. They carry an aura, a certain mystery that makes us hang on their every note, every word, every move. Carlos Santana is one of those legends. For decades, his guitar has been a beacon, weaving together rock, blues, and Latin rhythms in a way that feels almost divine. Carlos Santana's story begins in the small, sun-soaked town of Autlán de Navarro, Mexico, where he was born on July 20th, 1947. Life there was simple but rich with culture, and music was everywhere. His father, José Santana, was a skilled mariachi musician who played the violin with a passion that seemed to flow through his veins. It wasn't just a job for José, it was a way of life. Naturally, he wanted his children to follow in his footsteps. Carlos was handed a violin at the age of 5. He practiced under his father's watchful eye, but as much as he admired his dad's talent, the violin didn't quite speak to him. It felt more like a chore than an instrument of expression. But life has a funny way of steering you toward your destiny. By the time he was 8, Carlos discovered the guitar, and everything changed. Growing up, Carlos wasn't just surrounded by music, he was immersed in it. He spent hours listening to traditional Mexican tunes, soaking up the rhythms and melodies of mariachi music. At the same time, the radio introduced him to American blues and rock artists like B.B. King, T-Bone Walker, and Little Richard. These contrasting styles began to shape his unique sound, a blend of cultures that would later define his music career. But life in Autlán was far from glamorous. His family didn't have much in terms of wealth. They lived modestly, and like many families of that era, they often had to work hard just to make ends meet. His father was performing at different events and was too busy to continue his son's guitar lessons. Then came into their lives an American man who befriended the young Santana. The man, who seemed friendly and supportive, ingratiated himself into their lives, presenting himself as a trusted figure. The abuse happened over a period of time, leaving the young Carlos confused, ashamed, and emotionally shattered. It's important to understand the dynamic here. The abuser exploited Carlos's trust and the innocence of his childhood. This man used manipulation, presenting himself as a friend and protector, to gain access to Carlos. The man lured him into situations where the abuse could occur, often under the guise of offering help or guidance. This grooming process left Carlos feeling trapped, unable to comprehend what was happening or how to escape it. The emotional toll was devastating. He felt isolated, burdened with a secret he couldn't share, and this led to a deep sense of shame that lingered for years. The scars went beyond the immediate pain. The abuse left him with feelings of unworthiness and mistrust, clouding his perception of relationships and safety. And so, in the late 1950s, when his family found out about this incident, the Santana family made a life-changing move to Tijuana, and eventually, San Francisco in the early 1960s. And so, like many immigrant families, they faced so many struggles, but one was essentially financial means of living. Carlos, eager to help out and find his place, took on a series of menial jobs to support himself and his family. His first job was as a dishwasher in a diner. Day after day, he stood over a steaming sink, scrubbing plates and silverware. It wasn't glamorous work, far from it. The pay was modest, the hours long, and the kitchen was often a chaotic whirlwind of clattering dishes and barking orders. Yet Carlos approached it with quiet determination. It wasn't just a job for him, it was a stepping stone, a way to contribute while holding on to his dream of becoming a musician. But dishwashing wasn't his only gig. Having the experience of working as a street musician in Tijuana before moving to San Francisco, on weekends and evenings, he'd grab his guitar and head to local clubs, bars, and parks, playing for tips. He wasn't just practicing his craft, he was surviving. His performances were raw and emotional, blending traditional Mexican music with the blues and rock influences he adored. In the evenings after his dishwashing shifts, he'd often head to jam sessions in San Francisco's burgeoning music scene. This was the 1960s, a time when the city was alive with counterculture energy and musical experimentation. Santana would lug his guitar to small gatherings, sometimes playing for hours without pay, just for the chance to make a name for himself. One of the more surprising jobs he took on was as a janitor at Mission High School, the same school he had attended. It was a humbling experience to clean the very halls where he had once walked as a student. But Carlos didn't let the irony of the situation weigh him down. Instead, he embraced the work as a necessary step on his journey. His first real gig came when he formed the Santana Blues Band. At the time, San Francisco was a hub of cultural and musical experimentation, and venues like the Fillmore West were known for showcasing fresh, boundary-pushing talent. The Santana Blues Band started playing at small clubs and bars, earning a reputation for their unique fusion of Latin rhythms, blues, and rock. Carlos's passionate, soulful guitar playing became the band's signature, and word began to spread. Oftentimes, they earned little more than tips, but they didn't care. They were making music, and that was everything. The turning point came at the famous Fillmore West in 1966, a legendary venue known for launching the careers of countless artists thanks to Bill Graham, the legendary concert promoter who would play a pivotal role in Santana's career. Graham had a knack for spotting talent, and when he saw the Santana Blues Band perform, he knew they were something special. He invited them to play at the Fillmore, a venue that was the launching pad for many of the era's biggest acts. In 1966, Santana's band got their first break playing there, and they made an impression. People couldn't get enough of their unique sound, a fusion of Latin rhythms, blues, and rock that felt entirely new. Carlos's guitar solos were mesmerizing, full of emotion and fire. The legendary concert promoter who would play a pivotal role in Santana's career. Graham had a knack for spotting talent, and when he saw the Santana Blues Band perform, he knew they were something special. He invited them to play at the Fillmore, a venue that was the launching pad for many of the era's biggest acts. But the moment that changed everything came in 1969 at Woodstock. Carlos was just 22 years old when his band was called up to perform at the now iconic festival. The interesting fact about this gig was they weren't even supposed to play that early in the lineup, but due to a last-minute change, they were pushed onto the stage before Carlos felt ready. He hadn't even had time to come down from a hallucinogenic trip, something he later admitted made the experience surreal. Yet, as soon as he struck the first chord, the crowd was hooked. Their performance of Soul Sacrifice became one of the most unforgettable moments of the festival. The intense energy, the raw passion, it was like Carlos's entire life had been leading up to that moment. What made the Woodstock performance even more remarkable was the behind-the-scenes chaos. Carlos later revealed that he had taken psychedelics before going on stage, which made the experience surreal and challenging. Yet, despite the circumstances, he delivered a performance that would cement his place in rock history. After Woodstock, Santana's career skyrocketed. Santana and his band secured a deal with Columbia Records in 1969, with significant help from Bill Graham, their manager and a staunch supporter. That same year, Santana performed at Woodstock, and their electrifying rendition of Soul Sacrifice catapulted them to instant fame. The performance, later immortalized in the Woodstock film, showcased the band's infectious energy and Carlos's blazing guitar skills to a massive audience. Their self-titled debut album, Santana 1969, followed shortly after, featuring the hit single Evil Ways. The album's blend of rock, Latin percussion, and blues reached number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart and stayed on the charts for over 2 years, solidifying Santana's place in the music world. Santana's second album, Abraxas 1970, took their success to even greater heights. It included iconic tracks like Black Magic Woman, a cover of the Fleetwood Mac song that Carlos transformed into a Latin-infused masterpiece, and Oye Como Va, a reimagined Tito Puente classic. Abraxas reached number 1 on the Billboard charts, selling millions of copies and cementing Santana as a household name. The third album, Santana the Three, 1971, continued the streak, featuring hits like No One to Depend On and Everybody's Everything. This period also saw the addition of guitarist Neil Schon to the band, creating a dual guitar dynamic that added depth to their sound. As Santana's fame grew, Carlos began exploring spirituality and incorporating those influences into his music. This was evident in Caravanserai 1972, a bold departure from the band's earlier style. The album leaned heavily into jazz fusion, with experimental arrangements and meditative themes. While it wasn't as commercially successful as previous albums, it earned critical acclaim and demonstrated Carlos's willingness to take risks. While Santana's career was soaring, his personal life was a different story. We often see icons like Carlos Santana as untouchable, living legends who seem to glide effortlessly through life. But the truth is, even the most gifted among us face struggles that can leave deep scars. For Carlos, one of those battles was with addiction. Drugs were everywhere in the music scene back then, practically woven into the fabric of the industry. For Carlos, the pull wasn't just about fitting in or chasing a high, it was about finding a way to cope. He later admitted that he used substances to escape feelings of isolation and stress, to quiet the noise in his head when life felt overwhelming. It wasn't long before the occasional indulgence turned into dependency. Drugs became a crutch, and Carlos found himself in a vicious cycle, chasing relief but only finding deeper chaos. Addiction didn't just take a toll on Carlos's body, it affected his relationships and his music. What turned it all around for Carlos? It wasn't just one moment, it was a series of realizations and choices. Spirituality played a huge role in his recovery. When Carlos became deeply involved with Indian guru Sri Chinmoy in the early 1970s, Deborah stood by his side. Deborah, the daughter of famed blues guitarist Saunders King, came from a musical family, which likely created an instant connection between the two. The pair married in 1973, marking the start of a relationship that would last for more than 3 decades. Deborah became a steady and supportive presence in Carlos's life as his fame skyrocketed. Together, they had 3 children, Salvador, Stella, and Angelica, and Deborah played a key role in managing aspects of Carlos's personal and professional life. Chinmoy's teachings, which emphasized meditation, self-discipline, and devotion to the divine, resonated deeply with Carlos during a time when he was seeking greater meaning in his life. Deborah supported him as he committed to the guru's spiritual practices, including adopting a vegetarian lifestyle, meditating daily, and even taking on the spiritual name Devadeep. During this time, Carlos collaborated with jazz legends like John McLaughlin and Miles Davis, further deepening his exploration of jazz and spirituality. The 1973 album Love, Devotion, Surrender, a collaboration with McLaughlin, was inspired by their mutual devotion to Indian spiritual leader Sri Chinmoy and showcased their shared interest in blending music with spiritual practices. While Carlos eventually parted ways with Sri Chinmoy in the 1980s, seeking to forge his own path, the spiritual foundation he gained during this time helped him face his addiction head-on. He began to see drugs not as an escape, but as a barrier to the clarity and connection he craved. Slowly, he worked to reclaim his life, focusing on his health, relationships, and music. Have you ever wondered how personal struggles shape the music we love? The mid to late 1970s were a turbulent time for Santana. Internal tensions and creative differences led to significant lineup changes within the band, with many original members departing. While Carlos continued releasing albums such as Welcome 1973 and Borboleta 1974, they didn't achieve the same commercial success as earlier works. Carlos also faced challenges in balancing his spiritual pursuits with the demands of the music industry. However, he remained dedicated to his craft, experimenting with different styles and collaborations to keep his sound fresh. By the 1990s, Santana's career had slowed down, but Carlos was far from done. In 1999, he released Supernatural, a collaborative album that reintroduced him to a new generation of listeners. The album featured hits like Smooth with Rob Thomas and Maria Maria with the product G&B. Supernatural became a global sensation, selling over 30 million copies and winning 9 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. It was a stunning comeback, proving that Santana's music transcended generations. For a long time, Carlos Santana struggled to reconcile the pain of his childhood with his sense of self. The emotional wounds left behind by those early experiences weren't just scars, they were deep, raw parts of his identity. These battles shaped not only his personality but also his music, giving it a depth and soul that resonated with millions. But how do you turn pain into beauty? It wasn't until much later in life that Carlos began to open up about his past. In interviews over the years, Carlos has shared glimpses of the darkness he endured. That kind of trauma doesn't just disappear. Carlos has said that for much of his early life, he felt like he was living in a fog, trying to protect himself from the world but also yearning for connection. In a 2000 interview, he bravely spoke about the abuse, breaking decades of silence. It wasn't easy, but he realized that keeping it inside was only giving it more power over him. Music became his escape. When words failed him, his guitar spoke for him. Those raw, aching notes you hear in his solos? They're not just sounds, they're his soul crying out. His pain gave his music an authenticity that connected with people on a deep, almost spiritual level. But it seems that was not the only way Carlos dealt with his emotions. Unknown to his wife, Kings, Carlos had been unfaithful in their marriage. In interviews, he acknowledged that he had made mistakes during their marriage. He expressed deep regret for his actions, calling them selfish, and recognizing the hurt they caused Deborah. In her 2005 memoir, Space Between the Stars, Deborah wrote candidly about her experiences, revealing the emotional struggles she endured as Carlos's wife. She described feeling neglected and undervalued at times, particularly as she juggled her role as a mother, partner, and supporter of his career. Over time, it became clear that Carlos and Deborah were growing in different directions. Carlos's spiritual journey and evolving perspectives on life didn't always align with Deborah's, though she tried to help him with it. While they both tried to make it work, the emotional distance became too great to bridge. In 2007, the couple decided to part ways. The divorce was amicable, with both expressing mutual respect and gratitude for the years they had shared. Carlos later admitted that losing Deborah was one of the most painful experiences of his life, calling it a wake-up call to reevaluate his priorities. Deborah continued her work as an author and philanthropist, while Carlos focused on his music, spirituality, and personal growth. In 2010, Carlos remarried drummer Cindy Blackman, known for her work with Lenny Kravitz. Their relationship has been a source of renewed happiness for Carlos, and he has often spoken about the importance of love, forgiveness, and learning from past mistakes. But it seems the universe took his words too seriously. In 2021, Carlos Santana underwent heart surgery. December that same year, he had to cancel several tour dates after experiencing a health issue. It was later revealed that he had a heart procedure to address a cardiac issue, though specific details about the surgery were not widely shared. He explained the situation to his fans, expressing his gratitude for their support and sharing that he was taking time to rest and heal. After a few months of rest, he returned to performing, stronger and more focused than ever. The experience was a wake-up call for him, and he took the time to reflect on his health and his life. A few months later, in July 2022, fans at a concert in Michigan got a real scare. Santana, mid-performance, suddenly collapsed on stage. The cause? Heat exhaustion and dehydration. It was a sobering moment. At 75, Santana was still giving his fans everything he had, but his body was asking for a timeout. Thankfully, he recovered and reassured everyone with his signature grace, saying, "Just taking it easy. I'll be back soon." Then came 2023, a year that tested Santana in a different way. During a performance, he made comments about gender identity that sparked backlash. It was one of those moments where words, perhaps spoken in a stream of thought, took on a life of their own. The remarks were seen as insensitive by many, leading to widespread criticism. Social media exploded, and it wasn't long before Santana found himself in hot water. But here's the thing about Carlos Santana. He's always been someone who owns his mistakes. He issued a public apology, clarifying that his intention was never to hurt or divide. In his own words, he said, "I want to honor and respect all people's ideals and beliefs." Was it enough? For some, yes. For others, the damage was done. But what stands out is his willingness to acknowledge his humanity. Who among us hasn't said something they later regretted? As fans, it's easy to put someone like Carlos Santana on a pedestal. But moments like these remind us that he's a person first and an icon second. It's his imperfections that make his story so relatable, don't you think? After all, life is a journey, and stories like Santana's remind us that even when we stumble, there's always a way to get back in tune. And maybe that's the magic of Carlos Santana. No matter what's happening on stage or off, he finds a way to turn the noise into music. Your thoughts?